John Miller was chilling on the front porch of his simple suburban house, drinking lukewarm coffee from his trusty, slightly beat-up mug. At 57, John had gotten used to the steady rhythm of a life built on keeping things low-key and predictable. The house, an old-school 80s build, had seen better days but was still a cozy spot for him and his wife, Sarah. They'd been hitched for over 3 decades, their marriage holding strong through life's ups and downs. Sarah was 55, with hints of silver running through her brown hair. She had this calm, graceful vibe, the kind you earn from years of rolling with the punches. She used to teach school but quit early, saying she was burned out, though John figured there was more to the story. They never had kids, which caused some tension back in the day, but eventually just became something they quietly accepted. They kept busy with hobbies. Sarah loved messing around in the garden. John was into building stuff with wood, and they hung out with neighbors now and then, but neither was super social. Money-wise, the Millers were doing all right, not rolling in it, but stable. John had worked as an accountant at a small company forever, a job that paid the bills, but wasn't exactly thrilling. Their life was simple, their fun low-key. They both dug classical music, took evening strolls, and watched old TV show reruns. They were the type of couple who could just sit quietly together and feel good about it. But lately, John noticed Sarah acting different, like she was restless or something. She'd been running errands that took way longer than they should, and she started taking the bus instead of driving, saying she liked the slower vibe and random chats with people. At first, John didn't make a big deal of it. They both picked up weird habits over the years, like how he'd spend Saturday mornings polishing his tools to a shine. Then there was the laughing. Sarah was usually pretty reserved, her jokes rare and subtle. But now, she'd come back from her errands all cheerful, her eyes sparkling over some joke she wouldn't spell. She kept mentioning the bus driver, some guy named Mike, more than seemed normal. He's a real character, she'd say. Or, Mike's got these hilarious stories about the people on his route. John tried to brush off the weird feeling in his gut. At his age, he figured it was normal to feel a little off sometimes. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that something was changing, like a tiny crack in their otherwise solid marriage. One night, while they were watching TV, John decided to bring it up. "You've been riding the bus a lot," he said casually. "What's the deal with that?" Sarah glanced at him, her smile soft but friendly. "It's just nice to get out and talk to folks. Mike's good to chat with, and it's cool to hear about someone else's day for a change." "Cool, as long as you're having fun," John said, forcing a smile. He didn't push it, not wanting to sound jealous or paranoid. That night, with Sarah sleeping peacefully next to him, John stared at the ceiling, his mind spinning. He thought about their years together, the tough times they'd gotten through, and the love that had carried them. But there was still this nagging doubt, a quiet worry he couldn't shake. The next day, while sanding a piece of oak in his workshop, John decided he'd keep an eye out. Maybe he was overthinking it, but if something was brewing, he wanted to be ready. He owed it to himself and the life they'd built to figure out what was going on. For now, he focused on the wood in his hands, letting its texture keep him grounded. It was a small thing, but it helped as the first hints of unease started to creep into his steady world. I've always been a guy who likes routine. The predictable flow of my days gave me a sense of calm, something I held on to more as the years went by. But lately, there's this weird vibe messing with that rhythm, a feeling I can't quite put my finger on. Sarah's sudden excitement for her errands was hard to miss. Every day, she'd head out with a bounce in her step, her face lit up with a spark I hadn't seen in forever. When she got back, she'd be full of stories, not about the store or the library, but about the people she ran into. Or, really one guy, the bus driver, Mike. His name kept popping up in her stories, and it was starting to bug me. She'd talk about his sense of humor, how nice he was, how he seemed to know everyone on his route. I tried to tell myself it was no big deal, just her enjoying some new faces in her day. After all, Sarah had spent years in the same house, living the same quiet life. Maybe she just needed a change of pace. That nagging doubt stuck with me, eating away at my thoughts. I started paying closer attention to Sarah, picking up on little things that might have seemed like nothing by themselves. How she spent extra time checking herself in the mirror each morning. How her voice got softer when she mentioned Mike's name. How her laugh seemed freer, like she'd shaken off some heavy load. I never saw myself as the jealous type, but man, jealousy creeps up on you. It starts small, just a quick thought you brush off as crazy. Then it builds, feeding on every glance, every word, until it's this loud, constant buzz in your head. I tried to drown it out, focusing on my woodworking or losing myself in my shop, but it didn't help. That doubt was like a shadow I couldn't shake. One day, I had to see for myself, Sarah mentioned when she'd be running her errands. So I made up a reason to be nearby, hanging out near the bus stop where she usually hopped on. I kept my distance, making sure she didn't spot me, and watched her get on the bus. From where I was, I could see him, Mike, The guy she kept talking about. He was younger than I'd pictured, maybe late 40s, with a laid-back grin and a vibe that seemed to pull people in. Sarah greeted him, big smile, her face lighting up in a way that hit me like a punch to the gut. They chatted for a bit before she sat down, her laugh ringing out. I stuck around until the bus drove off, then headed home, my head spinning with feelings I couldn't sort out. I told myself it was nothing, that I was making it up, but that moment, her smile, his smile, how easy they seemed together, kept replaying in my mind. It was too much to ignore. That night, I tried to shove it all aside, sticking to our usual routine. But as the days went on, my suspicions just got worse. I started tracking Sarah's schedule, noting when she left and came back, the reasons she gave, the little shifts in how she acted. I felt like an outsider in my own house, watching my life come apart bit by bit. Still, I couldn't bring myself to ask her about it. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just my own fears, scared of losing the steady life I'd built? But deep down, I knew something was off. It was in how she looked at me, the gap that had slipped into our talks, the laughter that didn't feel like mine anymore. The storm I'd been dreading wasn't just coming. It was here, getting stronger every day, weighing me down like it could rip everything apart. For now, all I could do was wait, stuck in this mess of my own suspicions, getting ready for whatever was coming. My days kept their uneasy rhythm, a thin layer of normal covering up a pit of doubt. Every morning, Sarah headed out for her errands, acting so calm it made me question my own head. Was I making this up? Was I turning nothing into something? But that voice in my head wouldn't shut up, pushing me to find out the truth. My nights were rough, filled with dreams that echoed my worries. Sarah's laugh stuck with me, her smile burned in my mind, but it was never for me. The distance between us, once so small, now felt like a wall I couldn't climb. I don't know what finally made me follow her. Maybe it was the sleepless nights or the weight of all those unanswered questions. That day, I left the house right after Sarah, keeping far enough back to stay unnoticed as I followed her to the bus stop. She got on like always, and I trailed in my car, staying out of sight. The bus route was one I knew, cutting through quiet neighborhoods and busy streets. I stayed focused, hands tight on the wheel, trying to guess where she was headed. When the bus stopped near a rundown motel on the edge of town, my stomach dropped. Sarah got off, with Mike right behind her, their laughter floating back to me as they walked toward the motel entrance. I parked a ways off, my heart pounding like crazy. Part of me screamed to turn around, to keep pretending I didn't know anything. But something stronger, something raw, kept me going. I had to know. I moved quietly, sticking to the shadows as I got closer to the building. The door they went through was cracked open, and I paused for just a second before stepping inside. The hallway was dim, smelling like old smoke and cheap cleaner. I could hear their voices, faint but clear, coming from a room up ahead. I crept closer, each step a fight between anger and heartbreak. When I got to the door, I stopped, my hand hovering over the knob. I knew what I'd find, but it still felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Gathering all my nerve, I pushed open the door. What I saw was exactly what I dreaded, but somehow worse than I could have pictured. Sarah and Mike were wrapped up together on the bed, caught up in a way that was way too intimate. The betrayal hit me like a punch, a pain so raw it knocked the air out of me. For a second, everything froze. All I could see was them, their gasps filling the air, my shock weighing me down like a ton of bricks. Then they noticed me. Sarah's face went from happy to horrified, her eyes wide as she fumbled to cover up. Mike stopped dead, his face showing a mix of surprise and guilt. I couldn't say a word. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but everything got stuck in my throat. Instead, I just turned and walked out, each step heavy with the realization that my whole world, everything I believed in, was shattered. The drive home was a fog. My thoughts were a mess. Anger, sadness, betrayal, embarrassment, all fighting to take over, leaving me empty and numb. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. Inside, the house was dead quiet. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing, my mind stuck on a loop of what I'd seen. The image of Sarah with Mike was burned into my brain, a wound that'd never heal. I had no clue what was next, but one thing was clear. The life I knew was done. The storm I felt coming had hit, and it left nothing but wreckage behind. The hours after dragged by in a blur. Sarah came home late, moving carefully like she didn't want to be noticed. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word, but her presence was like a heavy weight in the room. Her guilt was obvious, but she didn't offer an excuse or an apology. That silence told me everything. I've always thought of myself as a level-headed guy, someone who thinks things through instead of acting rash. But this betrayal was different. It wasn't just a crack in our marriage. It was the whole thing collapsing. I couldn't brush it off, couldn't forgive it, and I sure as hell couldn't let it slide. Revenge wasn't something I'd ever thought about before, but now, it was all I could think about. Every moment was consumed with wanting to make them feel even a bit of the hurt they dumped on me. Sarah and Mike had wrecked my life. It only seemed right to hit back. I started with Mike. He was an easy target, a guy whose life ran on routine. I spent days watching him, figuring out his habits, his schedule, his weak spots. He acted cocky, like he was untouchable. That attitude was going to be his downfall. My first move was low-key. I spread some rumors around town, framing them as worried whispers instead of straight-up attacks. Stories about Mike's shady behavior started getting around. Soon enough, they reached his boss. I made sure to be nearby when his supervisor pulled him aside for a talk. Watching as Mike's face went from confused to pissed to barely hiding his panic. Next, I hit him where it hurt, his wallet. I found out he'd been pocketing cash from some side gigs, thinking he'd covered his tracks. It didn't take much to dig up proof and tip off the cops anonymously. The investigation moved fast, and the fallout was rough. His bank accounts got locked, his reputation took another hit, and his future looked shaky. Sarah didn't get off easy either. I didn't call her out directly. Instead, I let my anger show in small, deliberate ways. I quit talking to her, letting her sit in the silence of a house that didn't feel like home anymore. When she tried to chat, I gave her nothing but cold stares, treating her like she didn't belong. But the big finish was still coming. I needed something final, something to make it crystal clear to both of them that their actions had consequences. I waited for the right moment, keeping my cool until the chance showed up. It came on a cold Friday night. Mike had started hitting a local dive bar, drowning his problems in booze. I followed him as he stumbled into the alley, barely able to walk straight, his defenses down. The darkness hid me as I moved closer, my steps quiet but purposeful. He didn't see me until it was too late. My fist smashed into his jaw, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. He tried to get up, but I didn't let up, years of bottled-up anger and betrayal driving every hit. I kept going until he was begging for me to stop, his voice rough and shaky. When I finally backed off, my knuckles bloody and my breath heavy, I felt a dark kind of satisfaction. Mike was a mess, physically and mentally. His cocky attitude swapped for fear. I left him sprawled in the dirt, a shell of the guy he used to be, and headed home without saying a word. The storm in my head hadn't calmed down, but I knew Sarah's turn was coming soon. She'd face her own consequences, and it had hit just as hard as what I'd done to Mike. The fallout from my run-in with Mike left me pumped but empty at the same time. I'd sent him a clear message, written in his bruises and broken ego, but the high didn't last. The anger inside me was still burning, and Sarah was next in line. For days, I watched her with the same cold focus I'd used on Mike. She tried to act like everything was fine, but I could see her cracking. Her laughs sounded fake, her smiles looked forced, and she moved like she knew something bad was coming. It was a Saturday afternoon when I decided it was time. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming quietly while making lunch. The scene so normal it felt almost ridiculous. How many times had I seen her like this, slicing veggies with quick hands? For mine somewhere else. But right then, I never felt so distant from her. I didn't say anything at first, letting my presence fill the room. She turned, jumping a bit when she saw me standing there, and for a split second, I caught a flash of fear in her eyes. She quickly hid it behind her usual calm face. But I'd seen it, and that was enough. I set a single envelope on the counter between us, packed with stuff I'd carefully put together. Photos, printed texts, even a motel receipt. Proof of her betrayal laid out plain as day. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it, her face going pale as she pulled out each piece of evidence. I stayed quiet, letting the silence do the talking. When she finally looked up, tears in her eyes, I felt nothing but ice-cold determination. No excuse or apology she could give would matter to me now. I know it all, I said, my voice low and even. No use pretending it didn't happen. Sarah opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She seemed to shrink right there, her toughness falling apart under my stare. I stepped closer, the open envelope sitting between us like an open wound. You made your choices, I said. Now you deal with what comes next. My plan for Sarah wasn't about getting physical. It was about tearing everything down. Over the next few weeks, I took apart our life bit by bit. I closed our joint accounts, pulled money from our shared savings, and cut every financial tie we had. She was left with nothing but her guilt and the empty husk of the life she'd thrown away. Sarah tried to talk to me, begging, crying, even getting mad, but I didn't budge. Her words just made me more determined, her tears reminding me of the ones I'd shed alone. I wasn't looking to fix things. I wanted her to feel the same helplessness, the same destruction she'd put me through. Mike didn't get off either. I sent proof of his shady dealings to the bus company, hard evidence they couldn't ignore. They fired him quick, cutting off his main income and his sense of stability. The guy who used to strut around was now a wreck, his confidence replaced by desperation. As weeks passed, I watched Sarah and Mike struggle to pick up their broken lives. Sarah moved out, her stuff thrown into boxes as she left the house we'd shared for years. Mike vanished from town, his name just a warning story whispered around the neighborhood. But standing in that empty house, surrounded by memories of our old life, I didn't feel any victory or joy. Revenge had driven me, but it didn't heal me like I'd hoped. The wounds were still there, fresh and painful, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. In the end, I figured out revenge, no matter how well planned or satisfying in the moment, couldn't fill the whole betrayal left behind. It was a quick fix, a way to feel in control when I felt powerless. But the scars it left were permanent, and I had to carry them alone. The life I'd known was gone, replaced by a big, empty void. It was on me to figure out what to do with it, how to rebuild, and keep going. For now, I let myself sit in the quiet, the stillness, hoping one day the storm in my head would finally settle. The days got colder, and the house, without Sarah, felt huge and silent. I'd spent weeks thinking, wrestling with the mess of feelings left after my revenge. But there was still this heavy ache, a weight that wouldn't go away. The final moment had to come, not just for them, but for me. I tracked Mike down to a rundown rental on the edge of town. He'd vanished after getting fired, his reputation trashed, and his money gone. But I knew he was still around, hiding out and dealing with the mess of his life. It was late evening when I showed up, the sky lit up with dark purple and bright orange. I parked a bit away and walked over, my boots crunching softly on the frosty ground, the sound muted by the trees around. The place was barely a house, more like a shack with dark windows and a heavy, lonely vibe. It fit him just right. I knocked once, hard, the sound cutting through the quiet. When the door creaked open, Mike's face appeared in the faint light, looking worn out and empty, his cocky attitude long gone. For a second, he didn't know who I was, but when it hit him, his eyes went wide with a mix of fear and anger. Without saying anything, I stepped inside, making him back up. The room was bare, smelling like dirty laundry and cheap booze. Mike started to mumble something, but I shut him up with a look that stopped him cold. No words tonight. No chance for him to talk his way out. I took my time, looking around at the sorry state of his life, then turned my focus on him. He tried to act tough, but his shaking hands gave him away. I could feel his nervousness growing with every second. Then I let loose. My fist smashed into his jaw, sending him stumbling back into a flimsy chair that broke under him. He tried to get up, but I didn't let up, every punch fueled by months of betrayal and rage. It wasn't even a fight. Mike didn't stand a chance against the anger I'd been holding in. When I finally stopped, Mike was slumped against the wall, breathing hard and uneven. Blood dripped from his nose and mouth, his face twisted with pain and defeat. I stood over him, my knuckles sore and bruised, and for the first time in forever, I felt a bit of calm. "You took everything from me," I said, my voice steady and low. "Now you know how it feels." I left him there, a wrecked man in a wrecked place, and stepped out into the cold night air. The stars were bright and sharp, cutting through the dark like bits of glass. For the first time in ages, I took a deep breath and felt the heaviness start to ease. When I got home, the house still felt empty, but it didn't feel like a grave anymore. It was a fresh start, a place to rebuild. Sarah was gone, Mike was done, and I was free. The scars from what happened would stick around, but they wouldn't control me. Sitting in the quiet living room, I caught a faint whiff of raspberries in the air, a sharp reminder of the past. It was Sarah's favorite jam, the kind she'd make from scratch every fall. I gave a bitter smile, knowing I'd never taste it again, but also knowing it didn't matter anymore. The storm was over, leaving everything different. And in that quiet, I started to hear the first small hints of hope.